Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I hope you are doing well. On the show today, Vikram Jeet Singh is back. And if you have been a regular listener of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast, you know that Vikram needs absolutely no introduction on this show. If you are even a reasonably new listener, I can guarantee that you've heard a conversation or two with Vikram on this podcast. Every time he is here, he is extremely generous and he shares with so much, it's effortless the way he shares. There's so much depth, the perspective he brings in. It's really something that I personally don't find very easily or easily accessible in the yoga world. So it's truly a privilege every time he is on this show. Okay. Today, we are doing a two-part series that I'm very excited about. Part one is going to be all about the yamas. It is a deep dive. If there is one conversation you listen to about the yamas, let it be this one. And next week, we'll be dropping part two, where we talk about all things niyamas. Okay. So the yamas are often overlooked. And they're not a checklist item in yoga, though sometimes in teacher trainings, it is treated like that. So what Vikram and I do in today's podcast is we take a deep dive into the 5 yamas. We spend a lot of time understanding the layers, the intricacies, how to apply them in modern yoga, how to measure progress, and how to really make them, for lack of a better word, stick. And I'm doing air quotes, and I know you can't see me. And Vikram eloquently, so effortlessly brings so much clarity to these 5 yamas. So I really hope you enjoy today's show. But before we get to the podcast interview itself, remember that all these episodes are available as video on our YouTube channel. You would just need to subscribe to Aham Yoga. Okay. And there is a playlist called Let's Talk Yoga, and you can watch us have this conversation as well. If you are more of a video person, if that makes sense. Okay, please remember, the only way you can help the Let's Talk Yoga podcast and all the guests that come on it is by leaving a review on Apple or a rating on Spotify, and then sharing this with a yoga friend. It really means a lot to us. As always, everything that we speak about in today's podcast will be linked in the show notes at letstalk.yoga, including Vikram's bio, how you can reach out to him, all the courses he offers, the couple of posts that he mentions in today's conversation. All of that will be at letstalk.yoga/listen. Okay. Until then, enjoy this conversation. I'll see you on the other side. Hi, Vikram. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast.
Hi, Aru. Thanks for having me again.
Well, I feel like sometimes I should do like an intro of yours and things like that. But then I'm like, you're no stranger to the podcast. Everybody knows who you are. And we just jump straight into this. Now, today we're going to do part one of a 2-part series, right? And I personally think that this is a topic that we don't pause enough on in modern yoga. You see people talking about the Bhagavad Gita and the Yoga Sutras, and I almost feel like we jump a step. So we're going to be exploring the yamas today. And where do you want to start? Okay, because I'm thinking these open the 8 limbs of yoga, right? And I'm wondering why these are actually at the top, because we start with asana and pranayama, and then we culture our mind or tame our mind in that way. But I feel like, I wonder why this was put ahead, right? It was almost like a filter or a bar of entry. Reminds me of modern day university, where you write essays and you submit scores and you prove your worthiness to get admission somewhere. So I'm wondering, how was these yamas, in this conversation, the yamas, how did one measure them? And why do these sit right at the top of the 8 limbs of yoga? I mean, just your thoughts, because embodying them seems like it was almost a prerequisite before you went into deeper yoga. It's a long-winded question, but I'll leave it at
that. So traditionally speaking, the yogic literature, speaking very, very widely, is full of lists all these great seers, these rishis, they love giving lists. And invariably, how it is even today, the first item on the list denotes the significance. So to me, it's no coincidence that the 8-limbed path, the Ashtanga Yoga, starts with the Yamas. So one of the first things that comes to my mind is, if we go back in time, in today's world, we definitely need it. But if you go back in time, if you travel back in time where things were simpler, a lot more peaceful, at least right at the beginning, one thing that was still needed for people living in large groups was some code of conduct, some way of deeming what is ethical and what is not ethical, something that would help prevent chaos in society. Chaos in here just could be getting stuck in traffic, but like I said, we're going way back in time. So to me, in my understanding of them, and the more I study them, the more it gets solidifies is, we often think of the concept of dharma, and the first thing that comes to your mind is Bhagavad Gita, right? Which makes sense. It is a tale of dharma and adharma. But to me, the Yoga Sutra, at least in the Sadhana Pada, in the second chapter or the second book, is a more action-oriented approach. So if you're going to give someone an action-oriented approach, and like Swami Hariharananda Aranya says, right in the commentary of the first sutra, when they're talking about Kriya Yoga, that this is for practitioners whose mind is not as focused as the ones who we were speaking to in the Samadhi Pada, in the first chapter. So my assumption is you're already looking at a sect of practitioners who are maybe still involved in mainstream society. I want to say like regular folks like you and I. And if someone is aspiring to be a yogi from a Patanjalian perspective, not the modern nomenclature, then they need to be really adept at meditating. So if you want your internal landscape to be calm, still, devoid of vrittis, it's only fair that your outer world can represent that. So you need to be given something to bring that sanctity in your outer world. Otherwise, how will the two worlds ever merge? So to me, it's an ethical framework that any practitioner, no matter how low or advanced they are, needs to have as part of their practice. I often hear the Ashtanga being called as ladders. In my view, it's not a ladder, it's a limb. It grows organically. My right limb was growing, thankfully, at the same pace as my left limb and my other limbs. It was an organic growth. Now, this is my modern interpretation. I'm not sure. This is not from any commentary. I also want to say that. So at least in my perspective, as a practitioner today, to me, I see this as an ethical framework. And that's why it sits right at the top. Because if you're looking to calm the inside, I need to know how should I be out in the world to replicate what's outside and inside, if that lens.
No, that's helpful. It's almost like in modern day, right? And I don't want to pause too much on this. We forget the for lack of a better word, the mental fitness that's needed to even be on this path of yoga in many ways. So there are 5 yamas, and they are in a certain order. So what are your thoughts on this? I mean, anyone who has studied the yamas even a little bit know that it is linked and overlapped, and they are all connected, right? And at a particular point in time, depending on what's going on in your life, a couple of yamas or a yama will be more relevant to you. And that will evolve and change as things change, as we change. So can we talk about the order for a moment? Any thoughts on this?
It's a great question. And again, there's lots, I highly recommend to pick up either Edwin Bryant's commentary or Swami Hariharananda Aranya's commentary. There's lots and lots to read, and theories and thoughts around why Ahimsa is the first. But I think it comes down, again, in a nutshell, it's a great question and a good segue into what we started with. If the very act of sitting still is disturbed, when you think of violence, none of those thoughts are rooted in equanimity, sattva, calm, steadiness. They're rooted in turbulence. They're rooted in, I guess, motion, movement. So it's no surprise that ahimsa is sitting right at the top. And I believe Vyasa says in his commentary that the goal of all the other yamas is to achieve ahimsa. And if we parse that a little bit more, and some commentators are more vocal than the others, they will go on to say that, ahimsa, or the very fact of being involved in any capacity, they break it down into three categories, right? The doer, the krata, the karita, or the anumodita, the three categories, right? You do the act yourself, you have the act done on your behalf, or the act of violence happens in your presence. They all are equally guilty. There is no free chit. You can't have someone else do your dirty work for you, to put it differently. So all that to say that there is a lot of repercussions. This entire world revolves around cause and effect, around action, around consequences, around karma. So if one is hoping at the long run to break the cycle of samsara, to reduce their imprint in all capacities in the life, in the body that they're leading, violence sits right on top. The taking of another sentient being's life in any capacity. So that's why, in my opinion, it gets the most leverage. Kind of like how avidya would get in the kleshas. That if you can eliminate avidya, the rest of the kleshas disappear. Similarly, if you're able to harness, if you're able to work with ahimsa, you by default are working across all the other four yamas.
So can we pause on ahimsa? Because I've always felt for myself like ahimsa is the leader of the yamas. It gets the spotlight, and rightly so. I feel like if there's one of those that you really pick, ahimsa in your word and thought and deed, is probably take you 10 lifetimes and more to even do justice, and whatever that means. So why is non-harm so central to a yogi's life? Because we live in a culture of, where we're pitted against each other a lot more.
Right.
And an example that comes to my mind is just cancel culture and not being tolerant of somebody's opinion. And that the world we live in, attacking someone, not physically, but, in all other means, is possible. So what is the significance of ahimsa?
I think ahimsa, as the other yamas, but ahimsa categorically is very rooted in the concept of ahankara, the I maker. And it's when we get so deeply entrenched in that, and we take everything else that doesn't fit our worldview, that doesn't fit our ethics. You spoke about cancel culture, that doesn't fit the way we think. We want to take it down. We want to take it down because in some way, form, or shape, we feel threatened by that viewpoint. We feel threatened by that thing's existence. Sometimes it's an actual person, right? We feel that they are a threat to us. And this is not, not speaking from a somatic perspective that, like, I see a big black bear and that's a threat, I should run. I'm not trying to sell any ahimsa there. You should run really fast, or whatever one does, I guess, when faced with a black bear. There's this threat of me, and the deeply I'm more entrenched in me, the more I'll fight back to protect me and to protect my I. Because when you ask at the base of it, who holds that very strong view that they will go at any length to defend it? Obviously, I'm not speaking in a dietary perspective, right? I'm speaking more in terms of thoughts. We see people do extremely malicious things sometimes. You are no stranger to social media and the internet. Sometimes I see really mean comments out there, like really taking down someone, attacking them. So if you peel the layers back, what's the bone of contention here? The bone of contention is that I would like to be right. And I'm willing to go to any extent to protect that image that I've created of myself. Because that image is going to be shattered, right? I've spent so much time in like creating this deep I sense, and I'm really embedded into it. So I'm willing to go to any extent to protect it. That would be more from a thought perspective. And then that obviously links into speech, because what I'm thinking will eventually come out of my mind,
Yeah.
To me, that's a good way to know if someone was to say, well, how do I know? Well, because it's coming out of your mind. The thoughts are feeding into your speech and subsequently the actions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is, I also feel like we've forgotten that our natural state is more sattvic, and we've moved so far away from it that when we feel, and I'm generalizing, when we feel all these other qualities, sometimes we feel like we have to put an armor around us and not show that we can be this giving and this kind and this peaceful, and almost find something to be upset about. I don't know if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, no,
but
it makes full sense.
It's like we have these sattvic qualities within us, and these yamas in many ways are trying to take us back or make us recognize that that's common in all of us. And I feel like, Ahimsa, you were saying how what is in your head will eventually come out in your speech. I actually think we've gotten so used to hiding that in many ways. We don't say what we mean, and sometimes that goes downhill when we say what we mean. But it's central to every second of our lives in many ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost, it's like you have to stop everything else and just focus on living these yamas, which is why I believe a lot of yogis would retreat and give away all their responsibilities. Now, before I get lost in a tangent here. So I feel like Ahimsa and Satya, they go hand in hand, right? Just as you were saying, what comes out of your mouth, your words. We also know that your daughter is named Satya. I want to know if there is a story behind that or a reason behind that. I'm like, when I was thinking of this podcast, I was like, probably his favorite Yama, if I can put it like that. So then should we talk about Satya at this point? Because there are higher truths, there are lower truths, and then there are things like telling a white lie. I was with my niece and nephew this weekend. I'm sure I told them a white lie or two when they asked for another chocolate and another candy and, something else with munch. So can we break down Satya and its role in a yogi's life? Because all of this was written for a yogi, right, who lived a certain way. Wasn't written for 2023, though it's highly relevant, right, and highly adaptable. But sometimes we forget that this was actually written for a different audience in some ways.
Yeah. Let me take a quick segue on that last thing that you said. So these are also called the Mahavratams, right? The great vows. And Patanjali is very clear. Maybe Patanjali had the hindsight to know that eventually his work would land up in the 21st century in the hands of folks like us. So it says there that, and it's, the commentators say, take it or leave it. But Patanjali's stance on this is very clear that jati, desha, kala, your geographical location, your caste, or any sort of affinity belonging that you can take in the modern world, and kala, time, right? They surpass all of them. There are no free passes on these three categories. So if someone was to say, well, we are modern day practitioners, if you're aspiring to be a yogi, if you're actually seeking kaivalya, if you're actually seeking chitta vritti nirodha, there are no free passes. Eventually, and I think you said this in the beginning, at some stage in your life, I'm not going to link it to age because it happens to people at different ages in their life. At some stage in your life, one will start moving more in that direction, should they feel inclined to. I'll stay on this digress for maybe a minute more, and then I'll go back to your question. I do not know if the goal of every modern day practitioner is to find moksha, samadhi, kaivalya, nirvana, whatever the end goal is, right? It's mostly flexibility, fitness, sleep better, better sex life, better relationships, and so on and so forth. And that's great. Those are all available. But at some point, if one is looking past that, then they will start reading into this book and trying to like match their lifestyle and try and fall into the Patanjalian qualifications of a yogi, right? If that's what they're desirous of. So all that to say that, and that's why they're a big favorite of mine. I just finished a course on that, is because there is enough homework, if you will, enough actual work, if you will, from the Yamas to live through many lifetimes, to even come close to start having a deep conscious connection with it, not something that you do on the weekends or as an Instagram challenge or something like that. Okay, so back to your question. So Satya is named after my grandfather, whose name was also Satya. And I could be, and I obviously I'm biased here, but he is definitely one, if not the most virtuous man I've known my whole life. He's also my first teacher, without him knowing he was teaching me, without me knowing he was teaching me. So I decided to pass on the high standards to Satya. Her name means truth. I keep reminding her, no pressure. She understands the concept of truth and vitalize very well. So yeah, that's the story behind Satya being named Satya. So as you know, in the Yoga Sutras, there's 3 ways of knowing pramana, right? What is correct? Direct perception. I know that this is the truth because I can see you through my camera. I can see you. I can see the mic, so I know that I'm talking to Aru. Satya, who's outside, can probably infer that, oh, my dad must be on a work call or something. He shut the door and I can hear voices. So that's inference. And then agama, right? The word of someone reliable. So the Yoga Sutra says, how do we know what is truth? This is a good way to know what is truth, right? You can use these 3 things. But the reality is everything is relative. Something that's true today, you and I are on a podcast, which is a true statement, in, I don't know, an hour from now would be a false statement because the podcast would be in the past. So from a very, I guess, universal perspective, there is one truth, which is the truth of a higher being, consciousness, Ishvara, depending on whatever school, lineage, your religious beliefs, there is this one truth. Everything else is changing, is subjective. So when I look at Satya, I feel that Satya falls in that category of finding out how one aligns with their subjective truth, right? Because at the end of the day, there are so many things in life that will only be true for someone else and untrue for someone else. You can take political parties, you can take the whole vaccine thing, the mask. We have lived through so many things where there's always 2 sides, right? Someone's truth and someone's not truth. So there is not really a benchmark from that perspective, but from the perspective of the Yoga Sutra, the guidelines are that, yes, you have to be non-violent and speak the truth. You speak the truth, but you don't be unkind. That's the caveat there. And you bring up a very interesting question, and this is more pertaining, and it's ironic that you use the example of your nephews and nieces, because this is true for people who have children in some capacity in their life. I have many a times white lied to Satya. I'm now that I'm aware of it and I catch myself, I'm stopping from doing that. And it's very interesting. Now, when I think about it, most times I've given her a white lie because in my head, I am protecting her from something that she does not need to know, which could make sense. But a lot of times when those white lies are personal about me, I don't want the image that she has of her father to change. So I'm actually, in most cases, protecting myself, not her, which is very interesting because people sometimes will lie and say, oh, that's a white lie. I didn't want that other person to get hurt. There are ways to say the truth without having the other person feel hurt, but it comes at the expense of you letting go of this image that you're trying to protect. And it's very easy. I invite you, anyone else who will listen to this, to think about the white lies in their lives. Make a little list of some of the white lies they use on a regular basis, and then parse and peel the layers back and see if at some level that white lie is to protect this image that you have of yourself. Oh, I'm so sorry. There was a big traffic jam. There was no traffic jam. I don't want to be looked at sturdy. I don't want to be looked at someone who doesn't care about the other person's time. Oh, I'm so sorry. Very, very innocent. The classic. I'm Indian, right? We love our cricket. Oh, sorry. I'm sick today. I'm at home watching a match. But that also means, it means that I love cricket and I'm at home watching the match and not at work. But it also means that I don't want them to think that that job doesn't matter. I'm not a good worker, all of those things. So it's very interesting when we take a deeper look at white lies to see what is it that we're trying to protect. My disclaimer is that at some times, if Satya wants something as a child, or if any child wants something, I might have to use a white lie, because in that point, for them to comprehend the perils of being given that is not possible. They're too young. But I'm saying that also is a good example. There's layers. There's many layers in Satya. And the only one who knows, this is my favorite part. I've known you for some time. We have a good relationship. But only I know when I'm not telling the truth. No one else does. That's the beauty of Satya. The beauty of Satya is that little voice inside you can call it Atman, soul, whatever word works for you, the witness, the Sakshi. That person knows when you're not telling the truth. And only you are aware of that. So if one is looking, and going back to your first question, that why the yamas, think about it. Imagine that I'm trying to work my way into deeper states of meditation, and there's this constant voice that's saying, that wasn't right. That wasn't the truth. So it's practically impossible. How can I even sit for half an hour, let alone 6-7 hours trying to attain deep stages of meditation when I don't have that peace inside? One word that comes to my mind when I think of all the yamas, actually, when I think of all the yamas and the niyamas, is Shanti, peace, which is quite similar to the classic example of the chitta vritti is like a nice still lake, like a calm body of water. A calm body of water is peaceful. Mm-hmm. When you're not violent, you are peaceful. There is no agitation. There is no turbulence. So that's my little take on Satya.
You said how there are layers to it, and I feel like Satya has extra layers to it, because it's one of those yamas, which is all of these. They're so simple yet complicated, right? And it's not very, when you read it in a book sometimes, or when they're taught in trainings, we tend to take a very black and white approach to it, right? And you read about them and then you forget about them. And you do them in those 2 weeks of teacher training, and then it's forgotten about after that. So I like how you said that it is only you who knows if you are telling the truth or it's true for you. I think there are two parts to it, right? One is the truth should matter to you, right? Like being honest, being truthful, that should be in some way something that is part of your own worldview. And I know people who don't care too much about right and wrong, who have actually stood in their truth and said, I don't care about right and wrong for these things as much. So a part of me is like, so should I be appreciative of how honest they are? Or should I actually be worried that I know this person, But what am I trying to get to? You said something about you speak your truth, but speak it with kindness. I think that is extremely significant, right? And something that needs a pause on. You can say your truth and be extremely kind about it and have compassion and do it in the right way. But at the same time, we should, and correct me if I'm wrong, we should detach from how that truth is perceived, right? What the other person thinks or judges us, or what goes on in their head, how it lands is out of our control. As long as you say what is 100% true to you, how it's processed on the other end is out of your control. Because we try to control that outcome also. I think sometimes.
So that's a great point, great question, great statement. And I think that this whole concept of this is my truth and that's not your truth, it's divisiveness. It's divisiveness that is the opposite of what these teachings are. These teachings are entrenched, doesn't matter dual, non-dual, but these teachings are entrenched in unanimity, in union. I understand that here yoga doesn't mean union. If anything else, it means disunion, but they are still rooted in not necessarily striking a line between you and the other, right? So this my truth, your truth, I feel Ahimsa is long forgotten in those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the train of thought that you have is, when you think of relationships in any capacity, there will be two sides to it. There will be two truths to it. There will be two perspectives to it. I think I've said this to you before that, you have your worldview and I have my worldview. Thankfully, because I know our worldviews, they mostly co-join. But there could be a time where your worldview does not match with mine. It doesn't make yours right or false. It doesn't make mine, right or false. That's your worldview. That's my worldview. And like you said, being able to have the discernment to detach from it and not engage in ahimsa. That's what I see mostly. It's okay to have a different worldview, but if you're so embedded in ahimsa to prove the other person wrong, as opposed to stepping away from it, that's where it's no longer my truth, your truth. Then it's more like, this is the only way, you are just refusing to see it. So we have lost track of Satya, at least the core essence of Satya. And like I said, Ahimsa has been long forgotten. So if it doesn't work, there's many a times in many relationships that I had to step back, that I had to step away, because that truth, that worldview, how that person saw a situation, anything, was not aligned with mine. Now the question is, am I going to spend a lot of effort in my mind, in my body, in my thoughts, in my actions, and my deeds to convince the person, to correct the person, to fight the person, or step away from it? Very important that I also say that this is a separate conversation from activism at any level. This is not that, something that's inherently incorrect, I need to step away from it. No, I cannot step away from it. Gandhi is a good example of that. Whenever people say ahimsa, they bring up Mahatma Gandhi, right? So he fought in his own way. His approach was not unanimously accepted by a lot of people. His approach was to get the Britishers out, but with non-violence. So I also want to say that this is not some sort of a caveat to let injustices happen in the world, to not stand up for worthy causes, to not fight where there is a fight that needs to be fought for the sake of humanity, or whatever the case may be. But the question is, how will one approach it?
Yeah.
And that again becomes a very personal question. I get this asked a lot of times, how do we do that? Well, you figure out what's your relationship with it. What activism and what fighting for a cause means for me might not be the same for something else. And we have our own worldviews, right? I kind of want to say this one thing about ahimsa, because mostly in yogic circles, in yoga conversations, ahimsa gets bundled into a food conversation and then gets forgotten.
Yeah. And I was trying not to go there because ahimsa means I have to be a vegetarian. No, it doesn't say anything like that. But I think we in modern yoga, and we've spoken about this before, we oversimplify and we expect these very rich and deep concepts that require more than a pause, right? You just got to stop and stay in that for so long and let it evolve. But we just put them in these boxes. And we're like, okay, it means ahimsa means this. Mahatma Gandhi and his approach, vegetarianism, and doing no harm. Right? And at some level, I feel like it's a cop-out because this is a lot of work. Just ahimsa and satya as a bundle together, we will need more than a lifetime to work through it. So, so say someone's listening to this and for some reasons, they haven't stood in their truth, right? and they haven't been kind to themselves or to people around them. And you and I know this is the hardest to practice with people closest to us. It is so easy to practice with a colleague or a stranger or somebody you barely know. So how is there anything that you have to say for anyone who wants to practice more Ahimsa and Satya before we go to the other three? More Ahimsa, more Satya, especially to our audience of yoga students and yoga teachers?
So for Ahimsa, it's a very hard practice, very easy practice, very hard to do. Pratipaksha bhavna, the practice of invoking counteracting thoughts. And opportunities are all around you. You know, for anybody who is listening and lives in India and is brave enough to drive, there's lots of opportunities for Pratipaksha Bhavna on any given day. It's my favorite example ever since I moved to India. You know, you have the choice to give someone the finger or resist that impulse and just hope that they get to wherever they're getting to because they seem to be in a rush safely, that everything is okay with them, that this one action doesn't lead into something drastic and severe. So to be able to be regulated in one's own emotions, I think is the first step. It's the seed. That seed, I speak by my personal experience, that seed will take many, many, many years to even stay in the soil. And then when you're able to actually, with sincerity, not for lip service, not because you heard me say this on this podcast, find some sense of compassion, then the seed has started to germinate. I think keeping the seed in the soil and not having it pop out like jelly beans is enough work for many lifetimes. That would be my practical tip for Ahimsa. For Satya, I would say that I would take it back to this construct of ahamkara and self-image. A lot of times we don't say our truth because we are afraid that it might show us as someone who the world does not perceive us to be. And that can be a hard thing. If I have spent a lot of time creating some sort of facade that fulfills some part of me, to be able to shatter and break that facade is going to take a lot of courage. It's going to take a lot of vulnerability. It's going to take a lot of resilience. So that's one reason why I see people, or if I think of myself of not standing in my truth, I would have to say something and potentially have a few people dislike me.
More than that, probably leave you. The loss could be greater, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's why.
Some food for thought, like, I mean, please don't take your headphones off when you're listening and start making a list of people that you'll be standing in your truth with. All of this is a lifelong process, but just bringing some awareness to that. You know, someone asked me, I think I forget in the workshop, I think, that what is one reason that I would say to them to study the yamas? And I said, to me, yamas are this invisible mirror that's around you at all times. And if you could only be aware enough to look into it, there is so much to see, so much to see. And the best part, only you see it. It's like one of those magic mirrors. The whole world is not seeing your flaws, so don't worry about it. But you know that mirror is there, and you've consciously conditioned yourself to not look, you know, whichever side your mirror is. That the first step is to break that resistance and be okay with that. You know, when I was young and reckless and did not really manage my money wisely, to put it simply, whenever I withdrew cash, when it said print receipt, I would always say no. Not because I was trying to save the world, because then I would have the knowledge that how much money is left in my bank, and I have to be a little more responsible in my choices for the next few days. But if I don't know, party.
Ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah. So in this case, no. So break the habit.
Fair enough. I feel like, you know, we could stop the podcast here, and there's plenty of work for a lifetime for a lot of people. Because Ahimsa and Satya, they're mentioned separately, but I feel like they're a combo. They cannot be separated. I do feel like the other three can stand on their own, But Ahimsa and Satya in a conversation for me also, you cannot speak of one without the other. Um, and and I think standing in your truth is directly related to your sense of self in many ways, right? Mm-hmm. And the stronger, in a good way, the sense of self, the more you'll be able to stand in your truth. So if I may move us on to the next one, okay, Steya. I think this is very prominent in the yoga world. We don't realize it, but just the example that comes to my mind is just wanting the next experience that you read about, wanting the next course, wanting somebody else's number of followers, or that whatever it is, right? But I also feel like all these yamas, we're all at a different spiritual evolution, right? And some of us might be just getting started on this journey. Some of us are a little further on. So, for example, some people will steal because otherwise they will starve and die, right? It is a necessity. They have no other means. They live in a place where it's just not an option, like how we have some options here. For some people, it is just what I call a crime of privilege, like stealing office stationery, taking free COVID kits when you don't need them. In my studio, I see this sometimes, is you have these reimbursements that corporate companies do for wellness programs. So they will be like, hey, can you give me the receipt in my husband's name? Because his company will pay for it. Though that is actually for him, not for her. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no. So he can buy you a gift card and then we could do it this way. But I cannot change dates on receipts and names on receipts and things like that. So
yeah.
Long story short, I'm guessing greed is inbuilt in us in many ways. Okay. I think it was meant to be a survival skill that has somewhere along the way gotten lost a little bit, right? And consumerism and materialism and all that we put in front of our eyes doesn't help. So in yoga, right? Why is this constantly wanting, stealing in many ways, an impediment? Because I want to be more blissful. I want to have those experiences I read about. I want all of this. But isn't that wanting also counterintuitive?
What's really ironic is, it says, right, 237, Asteya pratishtayam sarva ratnopasthanam. So basically that if you practice non-stealing, you will get all the jewels will manifest. But here we're doing just the opposite. We are stealing for jewels, for wealth. You can replace jewels and wealth with whatever one is stealing for. But it's ironic that the sutra actually says that if you practice this, they will magically appear. They will come into your life. And my answer, at least the first part, is a little philosophical, is that the jewels that the sutra is talking about is not actual jewels. As you can tell, the language is quite archaic. I'm not sure who is manifesting jewels nowadays. Maybe some people are, rubies, golds, like that kind of stuff. The pirates loot. It's speaking about a different kind of wealth. It's speaking about a wealth that is that you in yourself are complete. Mm-hmm. You don't have to hanker after objects in the material world so that they can basically even further entrench you in this sense of I that you've created. This I that you've created needs all these things. And because we live in society, so we look and say, oh, if I had that, I would do this. I would feel like this. If I had this, I would feel like this. A better car, more money, better job, a better partner. The list is on and on and on. Second series, third series, a better yoga mat, a better prop. The list is endless, right? And you can see capitalism and advertising plays to that beautifully. They will create this object of your desire. So when you look at that, you're not even looking at what's being sold. You're looking at that end object that you are desirous of. And in your mind, that bond has been made. It's very important. I got to tell you, to be a successful ad person, You have to be an excellent human psyche person to tap into that, to know that this is going to explode in people's minds and they would want this right away. So that bond has been made, what's that thing? I forget in Avatar, when the tails join, the haiku, something gets made, right? That connection's been made. So in your mind, you have convinced yourself that that is the object of your desire and it's going to do a lot of these things for you. And you are willing to go to any effect to get it. So this is like you said, I love that word, crime of the privileged. This is obviously not someone who's trying to feed their kids, who's homeless, who has no money. This is intellectual talk for the privileged. You and I'm falling in that category. So I know that. So that bond has been made, and I'm willing to go to any extent. I'm willing to steal. I'm willing to hurt. I'm willing to manipulate. I'm willing to be dishonest. I'm willing to go to any extent, because in my head, that bond is so strong that I want that, because that's going to bring me something. And it will bring that something, but you already know this, that is the nature of desire. There's going to be this flat line for however time that is, and the next bond will start getting formed. And then the next bond and the next bond. I've had very different experiences in life, career, and so on and so forth. I've seen how invested people are in this upkeep of this image that they've created. I know of stories where there's literally zero money left in the bank, but the show must go on. The grandeur must go on because it's expected. You're used to it. What will people say? What will people say? So it's again that same thing that I on my own am nothing. I have nothing. I am hollow, shallow, incomplete. But when I get all these things, I'm going to feel complete. I'm going to feel fulfilled. And depending on how badly you want those things is how prone you will be to stealing. Yes. You're right. You see it in the yoga world all the time. I would have students that so desperately want that pose. And I can see that they will hurt their body on the way. I can see that they're not ready to hear what I say. Mm-hmm. I can see that in their head, that bond's been made, because when they do that crazy deep back bend, they will receive, I don't know, some sort of a miraculous blessing that will take them forward on the path of enlightenment, or I don't know, or maybe more IG followers, or a great photo shoot. I don't know. I don't know what's happening in their head, but I've seen that. And once you become aware of it, please, this is not a holier than thou chat. I've been there. That's why I can speak about it. It's very hard to talk someone out of it.
Yeah.
It's very hard. It's very hard to break that bond, to say that, pause for a second and ask yourself, do you really need it? What would be different at when you are able to acquire this thing, whatever this thing is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't even think we should, it's our job description to talk people out of it. It's to say it, to give them that perspective, and then to be like, it's for you to decide where you go from here. And I always tell people, I'm not going to convince anyone to do any yoga, whether it's asana, pranayama, or any part of yoga. I will tell you what little I know, and the rest is up to you. So it is, I feel like Asteya is so prevalent in the yoga world. It's become so natural for us to keep wanting that we've forgotten about it. I'll
tell you another thing, because I speak about it a lot. To me, any conversation around cultural appropriation is rooted in Asteya. It's straight up stealing. It is straight up picking pieces that don't fulfill my narrative, and I want to make money out of it. But I also don't want to say that, hey, what I'm doing doesn't sound very ethical. So I cover it with like, none of your business. I cover it with like fancy advertising. I cover it with like catchy slogans. Maybe offline, I'll share this most recent one that I came across, had me in splits with zero validity. So yeah, that to me is like straight up stealing. Straight up stealing, and it's ironic that you are speaking in this broad genre of yoga. Let's forget enlightenment and all that good stuff. You're like getting a big F on a
Yeah.
Steya, right? It's a foundational principle. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, my most fun ones are when all of these things, when we say these things and we remind people about these, you and I are called what? Conservative thought, outdated, things like that. I'm like, yoga doesn't need any updates. It's not like a software. Okay, this is hardware. It works really well. It's beyond hardware.
We need updates. So if we can keep our focus and attention, that little, everyone's got a Mac or an Apple, I feel nowadays. So when that gray icon has like a red circle on it and you rush to quickly update it, we try and find that invisible mirror. It's packed
Right
with
there.
updates, just waiting to be downloaded. So you'll be busy for a long time, I promise you.
So true. So true. So I want to move us to Brahmacharya. Okay. Because I feel like this is the most confused of the lot. And again, I want to remind people that it was written for yogis, and people who were doing severe penance, and not necessarily for you and me. Yes, there are aspects of it. And if we want to live like yogis, we can move into certain things. But can we talk about who is a brahmachari? Because I feel like this one needs a pause and a little more clarification. Who is a brahmachari? Because when I think of a brahmachari, in my head, if I go back to the younger me, we used to look up to them for their self-discipline, for their self-mastery, self-control. I don't think self-control is a bad thing. I think control and discipline are great qualities to have, for their self-control, but it wasn't for everyone, right? So why is sensory indulgence or it could be sexual gratification or any sensory gratification, why is that considered to be an impediment on the path of yoga?
So the words in the sutra, right? Virya, energy, valor, enthusiasm, many words, right? So this is no secret. This is a very well-known fact that any sort of orgasmic activities, any sort of sexual indulgence will decrease one's, for the lack of a better word, energy. It's a known thing, right? Now, for householders like us, you might say that, well, I don't know if I really need to be harnessing all of that. But that doesn't apply to someone who is a yogi, at least from a Patanjalian perspective, for them to keep the ojas, to keep the prana, to keep the life force contained. If I'm going to be meditating for 13, 14, 15 hours a day, and I'm trying to still my mind, for most of us, our thoughts are right at the bottom of our spine, in the pelvic floor, in that area, what is it that they say? Sex and food, like those are our two most primal survival instincts. What differentiates us from animals is this capacity, this discernment, right? An animal would be satiated with food and sex and they would be happy, right? But that's not us. We are quote unquote evolved beings. So that's an easy one. That's a given. There is no rocket science that no one has to go around trying to prove that wrong. We don't need a scientific journal to say that, yes, these yogis were correct. They were on the right path. We know that. Now, the question is that what one is aspiring for as a modern day practitioner? Is that virya right there along with everything else why they bring to the yoga practice? Maybe, maybe not. It's very common to go to an ashram here to get initiated, or even if you, let's say, if I went to an ashram and said, I'd like to live here for 6 months, I would have to take a vow of celibacy. It's expected of the lifestyle that I'm choosing to take, irrespective of what I do once I leave. It's a given. It is a part of a monastic order. It is a part of being a renunciate. It is a part of harnessing your desire. It's our most primal and our strongest desire. So from a Patanjalian perspective, this is an absolute one. Now, I don't know if you're a modern day practitioner and you're listening to this, you would have an absolute relationship. Let me also pause and say that for all yamas and niyamas, you have two aspects. You have an absolute following of the yamas and niyamas and a relative. A relative is how it applies to you and how it can benefit you on your yogic/spiritual path, which is always evolving. My application of Brahmacharya is different when I was in my 20s. It's different when I got married. It'll probably be different when I'm 65, 70, right? So I leave that to you to, as to folks who are listening to think about. Now, when it comes to finding a relativity to Brahmacharya, what can I say to you outside of this monastic order? What I would say to you is that if I peel away the layers of Brahmacharya, it's revolved around virya and energy, right? And that energy is in many forms, including sex. So if I was a modern day practitioner trying to embody the Yama of Brahmacharya, I'm looking at energy preservation. I am looking at not letting my energy being dissipated everywhere, so I cannot show up for my yogic path. I cannot show up for my yoga practice. It is a wise usage of my energy.
Mm-hmm.
Simple things. Would I want to be stealing? No. Do I want to be gossiping? No. Do I want to be dishonest? No. Do I want to fill my inner landscape with do I want to lead a life that is filled with actions that would result in tumultuous thoughts that would disturb my inner sanctity?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, whether you have sex or not, it's a personal choice.
Yeah.
But say that if you're not in the monastic order, to take Brahmacharya and just put it around the very act of having sex would be a huge disservice for a modern day practitioner. You could be having sex, you could not be having sex, but if you are not able to harness and use your energy wisely and have it be dissipated in all ways, in my opinion, one is not doing a good job or a job at all of embodying the Yama of Brahmacharya.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If I take a step back from a brahmachari, something at least, and this, at least something I talked to about at the studio, is I ask practitioners to notice what state they are walking onto their mat in, right? Are they just physically exhausted, mentally drained? Because growing up, it reminds me of my grandmother who used to practice muddy. I don't know how to explain that. You showed up a certain way for things that mattered to you. For her, it was her rituals and her religious stuff. She was a bhakti yogi in many ways. It mattered to her to show up in the purest form possible. And we don't do that in modern yoga. We just show up broken in many ways and sit on our mat, which makes us work a lot harder. Okay. In my yoga school days, I remember we had to practice mauna, silence. From the moment we entered the gates of the school till we left, and I was so literal, till the school went out of my eyesight, I would not talk, and that's when I was first exposed to this concept of your energy just flows by talking, by seeing unnecessary things with them in today's day and age with your phone, by listening to unnecessary things. And a lot of yoga practitioners do not think of sensory indulgence or sexual gratification as energy expenditure, right? They just say, oh, it's our instinct. And I was talking to a group a couple of years ago, and I was talking about Brahmacharya. And I was talking about ojas and energy preservation and how the books actually tell you how that ojas travels up and how it changes. And they just all burst out laughing. I remember that. And I had to pause and tell them, I'm like, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean you dismiss it, and it is, it gets translated as balance, try to find balance in your sensory indulgences. I don't think, that's why I like to remind people, this was written for a yogi. Are you trying to be a yogi? Let's have that conversation first. Because then I tell my students, you shouldn't be talking to me. You should be going to somebody else, firstly.
You can draw the lines. It's not a problem. You can draw the line and say that, sure, be faithful, find balance, practice ahimsa in relationships that involve sex, power dynamics, all that good stuff. You can draw all those lines.
Yeah.
You can call it balance. You can call it energy conservation. but there is a deeper aspect to it. It's
Yes.
not, I'm not going to conserve my energy and have a 4-hour binge on Netflix. No, I'm not going to like my energy and be on my phone. It's the energy conservation for a modern day practitioner to keep you on the path and help you show up, like you said, with the energy for other parts of your practice, you know?
Exactly. Because the practice takes a lot of effort.
Of course.
So the more you're, just like your phone on 100% battery or your car fully charged or with fuel will go for a longer distance, the more you are, your battery is full, you will go a longer distance in your practice, right? In your exploration. So yeah. I think it's really just brushed under the carpet because a lot of people don't understand how to, like you said, draw those lines for yourself. And
there's also a deeper aspect. There are two deeper aspects. A, moderation, right? Because this is by its very nature gratification of any kind, right? Sex or not. So A, finding moderation, and B, not letting it influence your entire being. Like I said, it's a very primal desire. And like any other desire, this one too, I speak from personal experience, has no endpoint to it. You can't be like, at this stage, at this years, at this many months, I'll be like, okay, cool, that was fun, I'm done. It's ingrained into us. We are born with it. It is part of our makeup. So it's not going to go away anywhere. The practice of yoga is to help you find the discernment to channel it appropriately. It's not going to disappear.
Exactly.
You know, you go for a Vipassana retreat, you're silent for 10 days. You probably eat half of what you do, but the energy levels are high. Why are they high? Because you're focused. Your energy is being used towards a very specific purpose and intent. So that's why I tell people, I said, at some point, if you're not a renunciate, then we are having a separate conversation. And you have to look past just the bodily functions of Brahmacharya. You know, that's not where it ends. You could be very faithful. You could be having moderation in your life, but it is a yama for a reason. It is in this list for a reason. It's not just some like random guideline in some subsection. It's to help you, amongst other things, propel you into your yoga practice. You know, we can't ignore that fact.
So true. And just a side note is I tell people that we've gotten confused with how yoga is marketed nowadays. It's marketed as a very spa-like experience where somebody will go and do the work on you and you will reap the benefits of it. But yoga is completely the opposite. You have to do the work yourself. So imagine if you have to, so you show up as rested and ready as you can be to make this what I call Herculean effort at points in life. So anyway, imagine if yoga could happen because somebody else made it happen on us. It would be great. We wouldn't be having this conversation.
Nope.
So let's go. I feel like Aparigraha, the final one in the Yamas, is probably the easiest to understand theoretically. I don't know if it's easy to practice for some people, right? And I include myself in that group. But it is, in concept, very relatable, right? Not hoarding. And we know that the yogis lived with very little to no possessions. They lived on the kindness of people around them. And they simplified their lives. So they didn't have things to look after, right? That, again, energy expenditure there, while they could invest that time and energy and effort on their own spiritual growth and journey. So in today's day and age of us fighting FOMO and capitalism, and just you were saying a while back, right? We have all these external things. Any thoughts on this? Because we are hoarding, right? And it's not just material possessions. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's also hoarding of concepts and ideas and thoughts. And I want to do, so many people ask me, Aru, do you offer a 300-hour? I'm like, no, don't. Okay. I used to, but I stopped. I might revamp it at some point. But I keep telling them, you don't need more. Just sit with what you've gotten so far, right? And go deeper. So How is this relevant, or what can we do to make this more relevant? Or generally your thoughts on Aparigraha?
You know how we linked Ahimsa and Satya? I like to link Steya and Aparigraha
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
we steal and then we make sure we can hold on to it. So it
true.
starts there. It starts with wanting it, and then we get it, and then we spend a lot of time and energy in holding on to it, right? And it's very interesting because in Aparigraha, also the concepts of likes and aversions, raga and dvesha come in, right? We are very clear to just keep the things we like. So we're already operating in this world that is further adding to that subconscious divide that this is good, keep it, this is bad, avoid, this is good. So rather than helping separate them, we're getting further entrenched with our hoarding. Who wants to keep stuff that they don't like? You give it away. Ask people, what is that you'd like to give away? It's normally things that they don't like. It's very common, you know. It's interesting. I see some very, very interesting things being done under the guise of charity, but maybe a different conversation. But it is true. And if you think that how we are built, you know, we are built with this sensory world that looks outside, not inside, right? So when I'm looking at my camera right now, I see a picture of you, and then I see the world outside, and I see the world outside, and I have no control. Speaking very, 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 very easily to keep things easy. I have no control. I have no restraint. I'm not living a life that's fueled by yamas. So I'm like constantly trying to grab stuff, because I'm seeing outside. But if for a second I had the perseverance to look inside, I would see that not much stuff is needed. You know, you gave that example of the yogis. They did not want much. It's because they had the capacity to look inside and see that not much is needed. They had the capacity to see that most of the stuff that's available in this materialistic world doesn't really go far, you know. I actually made a post on all the yamas and the niyamas. So if you're listening, go look them up. They're all there somewhere.
I'll link them also in the show notes. Yeah.
One of the things about Aparigraha is that, you know, sorry for sounding graphic, but we came with nothing, literally, and we'll leave with nothing. So who are you holding onto it for? In your head, you think you're holding it on for yourself, for your kids, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. But who? It doesn't matter whether you believe in reincarnation or not. Even if you think this is it, this is the one right ticket, great. This one right ticket also will come to an end. So all this that you're accumulating with the intent that it'll do something will have no purpose or meaning anyway. But it's hard. It sounds good. It's a lovely bumper sticker, but to embody it is very hard because we are conditioned to it. What does a baby do? It reaches its hands and hold. It's inbuilt into us. We have been designed to function in this world. So we are constantly looking outside. Our senses, our limbs, our motor organs are made to grasp. The question is, can we find the discernment to grab things that will again take us up on this path? No problem with grabbing. No problem with grabbing. Maybe I'll say reach. Grab just sounds very aggressive. But can we reach for stuff that we are not doing it from a selfish perspective? No one is doing selfless aparigraha. Anyone who's grabbing is grabbing for themselves. You know, when you see this, I forget something I saw, some high-end designer store got mobbed and people just like grabbing bags and purses and running away. They were grabbing them for themselves or to maybe sell and make money and stuff like that. No one was like, oh, I'm going to build a hospital wing. Let me grab.
Yeah. It was not Robin Hood type of story.
Yeah. It's not, you know. And interesting about Aparigraha, well, you know, because we hoard, this is more from I hate to use the word because it sometimes has a bad connotation, but more from a self-help perspective. A lot of my identity has been shaped by inputs I've received from outside, friends, family, parents, caregivers, children. And at some point, I have also hoarded and held on to those.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't have the discipline or a yogic practice that can peel those layers in this state of ignorance, I'm acting even more ignorant if this possible by putting on those layers that society has, I'm just using society loosely speaking, has put on me, but they have no bearing. They have no Satya. They have no truth, but they become a part of me.
Mm-hmm.
I would, so some food for thought around that too.
Yeah, no, as you were brought this point up of how it's been handed over, I was thinking the same thing of how a lot of these narratives are handed down and are in many ways cultural conditioning, societal conditioning. So you have to discern. I think the reason why a lot of us just jump over the yamas, niyamas is it's easier to read a sutra, quote a sutra, and try to interpret a sutra sometimes. But it's much harder to work these layers because this is all relative, it's subjective. What one yama means to you today will change based on how things move. So it's constant work, right? It's never ending. And I think that's the beauty of it. It keeps you in check in many ways. And I'm in full agreement with you. I've said it too. You are born with nothing. You will, when you die and go, you will leave everything behind. Okay. There's no sugarcoating on that one from my end. But so as we wrap these up, so let me ask you the question that probably a lot of listeners have been wanting to ask is, how do we stick to the yamas, right? What is needed to make the yamas a part of our practice, or one or two yamas? The number doesn't matter. Is it intention? Is it having a mentor or a teacher? Not any teacher. I believe there are many yoga teachers who don't practice yamas, niyamas floating around. Or is it, should I have a goal? Should I practice it 30 minutes a day? How do I lay out this plan for myself to make yamas more a part of my practice, my life, my worldview?
Great
and how
question.
do I measure progress? Because right now I'm listening to this podcast, I'm inspired. Next week we'll listen to part 2. I'll be inspired for 2 weeks. Then we go back to same old. So your thoughts on making it, for lack of a better word, stick?
So a few approaches to it. One approach is, because I think I heard you say that about being goal oriented, right? And it's nice. Goals are tangible, well, for most parts. So it's nice it's nice to put some goals around it. You cannot put a percentage. You cannot be 45% following Ahimsa. I don't know how to measure that, and 45 is too less a mark. Nowadays, anything less than 90 doesn't get you anywhere. So anyway.
It is such an Indian reference, by the way.
Yes.
90 and 45. I totally get it.
My nephew got 90. Back in the day, if I got 90, I would have run away from home and just said, I don't know.
I've done it all. Yeah.
I've done it all. He got 90. He's getting it from his parents. Because 98 is the new whatever it used to be.
98 is the new 101. Yeah. It is. A lot of people don't, I'm guessing all the non-Indian listeners will not relate to the percentages and how things work in the education system in India. Yeah.
So give yourself a goal. So, okay, let me give you my personal example. For me, Ahimsa, and I say that I'm, not that it matters, but for the record, I have been, vegan for many, many years. That's an easy one for me as far as Ahimsa and food go. So that is done, put aside. For me, I find Ahimsa flaring up most frequently in being judgmental, and being judgmental towards absolute strangers, because I know nothing about them or their circumstances, which I think for me is kind of like my red flag. It flares up the most. Give that example about driving and other occasions. So for me, that's a tangible goal that I want to give myself, that I want to move away from that habitual place of autopilot, habitual behavior, habitual thinking, and try and start planting opposing seeds there. That's a samskara that's in me. That's a latent impression in me that is a part of my makeup. That is a part of my being. Thankfully I'm in this world and have a little bit of awareness to work towards it, but it's a steep climb. So that to me is a good manifestation of how am I going to bring ahimsa into my life. It's right there. I see it. It shows up as a pattern. So maybe taking some time to look at some patterns in your life that show up under these five, whether it's nonviolence, whether it's ahimsa, whether it's satya, whether it's steya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. Find some common patterns. Be gentle on yourself. Don't write 100-point list. Just pick maybe one. Write them down as habits and patterns that show up on a regular basis. And then I'll go to your second point. See if there is a teacher, a mentor, someone in that capacity in your life that you can work with to parse them if they need any further explanation. It's very easy to fool ourselves on this path. Like I said, in yogic circles, it's very, oh yeah, I got that down. No, you didn't. You don't have that down. You only have a piece of that down, and that's a very tiny piece. So a combination of one, first taking our time to list down, because no one can extract that from you. You do that check and write what are some things that show up as constant patterns that would fit into these parameters. And then do a combination of two things: working with a teacher if you have one, or giving yourself a clear path, some clear activities, some clear objectives that you will work with to plant either opposing behavior or to work on minimizing the instances of that happening. It's a work in progress. Unfortunately, like Aru correctly you said, it will drop off. Life will get busy, other things will take precedence. So this has to be part of your daily practice. Could be in the form of journaling, could be in the form of contemplative meditation, could be in the form of a one-on-one session that you have with your teacher. If you're someone who likes to be kept accountable, who needs that external support. So using a few of those parameters, consistency is the key here. It's not a one-off thing. So also not setting yourself up for failure, starting small, making some progress there, and then adding to it. It'll be practically impossible to do all of this at the same time. It's like me trying to be an expert at Vedic chanting, but also learn all the secrets of the Tantra world and have a great asana practice and meditate for 14 hours and be around for Satya. It's not going to happen. So be very objective, embrace Satya, embody Satya, and be true to what you can commit to, and then go from there.
Essentially take a very realistic view, because you just look at this list and you want to do all of it, but it's not practical to do all of it. I really like how you identified, notice your patterns and habits and start there, because now everybody has a starting point, right? You can't just take this list and launch into trying to apply them when you don't know where to apply them. And we'll apply them in the easy parts of life. We won't apply them where they really need it. Right. So I think I'd just like to add one more thing there too. You spoke about having a teacher, a mentor, and I have seen this myself. One of my main teachers, he barely spoke about the yamas, niyamas, right? He just spoke about it in passing. But what was so impactful for me till today is he would embody them. You could see them. He never said, now I'm doing this, watch this. No, he just was. Ahimsa was just part of him. Being truthful it was so effortless. And that was so powerful to witness somebody who was just so centered and grounded and simple. And I learned more about the yamas by just watching than any book has ever taught me. So I think that is such a significant part, to find that mentor who can build that structure for you a little bit. You still got to do the work. But I think that's really habits, patterns, and a teacher is at least where somebody starts.
The last thing I would say to that question is, if that speaks to you, do a 2-part column, do an absolute and a relative column. For example, for you, as in you who is listening to this, when you say ahimsa, what does that mean in its complete totality? And then write it down. And what does it mean in relative totality? And then write it down. It's easy. I get this all the time, oh, should I be eating? I don't know. You need to know that. The text is very clear. If you want to go, sorry, it's really tattered, but if you want to go with what this has to say, do not be a householder, be a renunciate. And absolutely do not, it's forbidden to eat meat. But that's not you. So if you're trying to build a relationship with the yamas and the niyamas, you have to find something that does not cause conflict in you. That's the key, shanti. You should be at peace with the yamas and niyamas that in this case, the yamas that you're practicing and how you're practicing with them, how you're practicing them. That's where I feel that having some sort of a benchmark, if you're trying to be vegetarian, maybe eat meat once, twice, I don't know, 3 times a week. That could be a relative goal.
Before you remove.
Reduce before you remove, What does Satya look like? Well, I'll make a conscious effort that this week I will not tell white lies. And if I do tell a white lie, maybe I'll go back and correct it. Maybe I'll call my friend and say, you know what, actually, I'm sorry, I wasn't running late. I left my home 15 minutes late. I'm sorry about that. It won't happen again. That's going to take a lot of effort.
And you'll feel lighter, honestly.
Oh my God, 100%. 100%. You know why you'll feel lighter? Because you're not holding on to that image of that I am perfect, I'm never late, I make no flaws, my friends cannot see me in any bad light. That's not true.
Yeah. So, and I know it's really late for you, so I'm going to make this the last one for part 1. So, and correct me if I'm wrong. So how does one know they're making progress? In my head, from listening to you, I'm thinking it is shanti, like your level. If you had a shantiometer, in that meter, your shanti levels are going up. You're more peaceful within you, right? None of this is demonstrable to the world outside. I don't even think it needs to be. A lot of times people think, oh, look, I am now Ahimsa practicing. So I've left all of this. I am now being so truthful. So here's my truth, But so your shanti should go up. The inherent quality, experience of shanti should go up in your head, in your words, in your heart, in your interaction. So that's one. So just being inherently peaceful. And that comes to you as your default nature. Over time, it should become more default, right? It shouldn't have, if you have to make tons of effort, you're still getting started. That's how I see it. You should also have enhanced clarity about your worldview. You should have less push and pull. Like, this is right in my world. This is wrong. This is how I will act. This is what I'll tolerate. This is what I'll not tolerate. That worldview gets clearer, right? Your compassion goes up because you now see that everybody suffers in many ways. Empathy is probably in there as well on my list. Anything else? Less things bother you, less things trigger you.
Yes. So it's linked with shanti, it's linked with peace, is there is a lack of conflict. You find yourself lesser and lesser at odds with the world outside. The people in your life or the world around you that we largely attribute to the stress in our life is not going to disappear, right? Even if you're a hardcore Advaita Vedantin and this is all Maya, it's not going to disappear. The Maya is here to stay for a bit, right? But there is less conflict. People say, if someone was to ask me, what does more shanti feel like? You'll see that on any given day, like if you look back, you're like, I haven't really argued with anybody. I haven't raised my voice. I felt more regulated in my emotions, whether with your child, with your partner, with a random person, That to me is a very clear indicator that the yamas or one's effort in the embodiment of the yamas is working, is that there is less conflict. The world around will still be pretty tumultuous. If you read the news, if you read the newspapers, there'll be fires and earthquakes and typhoons and wars and all that stuff. I'm talking about your inner conflict. There is a drastic reduction in that.
Okay.
And you're right, it's not external, but don't be surprised if people tell you, you'll become aware of it, and then people around you will become aware of it. It is in the sutras that someone who's established in nonviolence, you can feel it once you come in their presence. Like you gave the example of your teacher.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They weren't wearing a t-shirt that, they didn't have the Shanti or Meter t-shirt that was sitting at like the top, been there, done that. You could feel it.
Mm.
It's not something whimsical, new agey. It wasn't their aura. It was actually them.
Mm-hmm. No, so true. I like that there's less conflict and you are drawn less to that. I was saying there's conflict, but you're drawn less to it.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that is really...
That's a very interesting thing, because that's again something I can attest to. Life is, and sorry, this sounds like a bumper sticker, but life is about challenges. Challenges will find you if you're subconsciously looking for them. But when you step away and you're not looking for them, you're not looking for those triggers, they will disappear. For a very long time, because some part of me felt fulfilled when engaged in that conflict. They were all around me, just waiting to be picked up. But when my own desire to engage in that dropped, and I had a more peaceful demeanor, they kind of just seemed to poof away, because they have no purpose to serve. It's life is there's a lot of synchronicity in life in that way. They will end up in someone else's sphere who needs that.
Yeah.
It has to serve a purpose. It's a two-sided coin.
No, wonderful. I mean, I am glad we are splitting this into a 2-part series, because you will have to give up more sleep at this point. So should we wrap this up here? Part 1 of our Yama conversation. I think there's a lot in here that the listeners can go back to. I just want to ask you one quick thing, and we can add this in part 2. You had a workbook coming up on the Yamas, Niyamas that you once told me about. Did that come through, not come through? I mean, if it is there, we could talk about it here, or we'll talk about it in part 2.
Perfect example for me to give you a white lie and make up some. I have lots of corporate experience. I can lie really well. So for me to give you a white lie, but no. So I have a dream of this workbook, and it's in my head.
It was a dream. Okay.
Well, dream as like it's a vision, a dream. It's still in my head. I have to put pen to paper and put it together. But I think something like that would be very beneficial.
I think so too. Okay.
So.
Okay. I was just curious. I was like, is it? I thought it was ready. I might have misunderstood what you were telling me a while back. But thank you so much. As always, this is so wonderful. It is so the work you do for people in the yoga community is so relevant. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Pleasure as always.
Thank you so much for listening. Please remember to subscribe to our newsletter for yoga teachers. The link is available in the podcast description. I will see you next week with part 2 of this conversation with Vikram. Until then, take care. Enjoy your practice. Bye-bye.